Groovy English Podcast.
Hey there! Welcome back to Groovy English. I'm Chloe.
And I'm Aiden. We share real stories, useful tips, and everyday English to help you grow with confidence.
Wherever you are in your English learning journey, we're glad you're here.
If you're enjoying the podcast, feel free to like, subscribe, or share it with a friend. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to Groovy English, the podcast that helps you grow your confidence, find your voice, and enjoy the ride as you learn English. I'm your host, Isabella. Today, we're diving into a topic that's super important but often misunderstood: motivation. We all want motivation, right? We imagine it as this magical spark that gets us moving, makes us study harder, practice more, and suddenly become fluent English speakers. But here's the thing: motivation is a myth. Not entirely, but not in the way you think. Most of us think motivation has to come first, that we need to feel inspired or pumped up to learn. So, we wait. We wait for that perfect moment of motivation, but it never really comes when we want it to. And then we feel frustrated, stuck, or even guilty. I want to share with you why this idea of waiting for motivation is holding you back, and more importantly, what actually works when it comes to learning English, or really anything in life. Because it's not about waiting for motivation. It's about creating habits, small actions, and understanding your own rhythm. First, let's unpack what motivation really is. Motivation isn't a steady, magical force. It comes and goes. It fluctuates based on your mood, energy, environment, and countless other things you can't always control. Sometimes you'll feel it strong, and sometimes it's almost invisible. That's why relying on motivation alone is like waiting for the wind to push your sailboat. Sometimes the wind blows, and sometimes it doesn't. But if you don't learn how to row your boat, you'll never reach your destination. What I've learned over the years is that motivation is actually a result of action, not the cause of it. In other words, you don't need to wait for motivation to start. Motivation often comes after you start doing something. Let me give you an example. Have you ever sat down to study English feeling tired or unmotivated, but then after just 5 or 10 minutes, you started feeling more engaged and focused? That's motivation showing up because you started moving, not before. So, the real secret isn't motivation itself, but starting. Starting with small, manageable steps that feel doable, even when you don't feel motivated. That's how progress happens. That's how habits are built. This is why so many big motivation techniques, like pep talks, inspirational quotes, or setting huge goals, often fail. They feel good in the moment but don't create sustainable change. Because motivation fades, and when it does, your habit collapses. Instead, I want to encourage you to think about consistency, not motivation. Think about what you can do every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Those small wins add up over time and create real momentum. Now, you might be thinking, but Isabella, how do I stay consistent if I don't feel motivated at all? Great question. The answer lies in designing your environment and mindset to make starting easier. For example, put your English learning materials somewhere visible and easy to access. Set reminders or alarms. Use apps that gamify learning so it feels fun. Tell a friend about your goals and check in with them. These actions help you push yourself into starting, even without motivation. Another thing that works well is shifting your mindset about what it means to learn. Instead of aiming for perfection or long study sessions, celebrate any small effort. Even if you just listen to a song in English or say one sentence out loud, that's progress. When you lower the bar, it becomes less scary to start. It becomes easier to show up. And guess what? Showing up, even imperfectly, builds motivation over time. Let's talk about a powerful habit I recommend, the 2-minute rule. It's simple. Commit to just 2 minutes of practice. That's it. When you start, you might feel like stopping, but usually, once you begin, you naturally keep going. This tiny habit removes the pressure and excuses like, I don't have time, or I'm too tired. 2 minutes is doable. And over days, weeks, and months, those 2-minute sessions grow into longer, more meaningful practice without the need for a huge motivational push. Another key to beating the motivation myth is to understand why you want to learn English. Your deeper purpose, your why. This might be to connect with people, travel, pass a test, or boost your career. When motivation feels low, reconnecting with your why can remind you that your effort matters beyond just studying. It's about living the life you want to live. But even knowing your why isn't enough if you don't take action. Motivation without action is just wishful thinking. Action is what fuels motivation, not the other way around. So instead of asking yourself, how can I get motivated, ask, what's one tiny thing I can do right now? Even if it's just repeating a sentence, writing a word, or listening to a podcast for a minute. This mindset shift from motivation waiting to action starting is what changes the game. It moves you from being stuck to moving forward, even on days when motivation feels absent. Another thing that helps is tracking your progress. When you see yourself completing small tasks regularly, you build confidence and motivation naturally. Use a journal, a checklist, or an app, anything that shows you are making progress. Let's dig a little deeper into why motivation feels so elusive. One reason is that our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Motivation often depends on how rewarding or enjoyable a task feels. When learning English feels like a chore, or when you're tired or stressed, motivation takes a back seat. That's why motivation is so unreliable. It depends on external factors, your mood, your environment, your energy levels. So, it's natural for motivation to fluctuate. But if you wait for motivation to be perfect, you'll be waiting forever. This is where habits come in. Habits don't require motivation. They become automatic, like brushing your teeth or locking the door when you leave the house. When you build habits around English learning, you don't have to rely on willpower or motivation to get started. Creating a habit is like planting a seed. At first, it needs attention and watering. But over time, it grows roots and becomes self-sustaining. The same is true for learning English. The first days and weeks might feel hard, but once the habit takes root, it keeps you going. I remember when I first started learning English seriously, I thought I needed to feel excited every day. But that rarely happened. Some days I felt tired, discouraged, or distracted. What helped me was creating a routine, a simple habit that didn't require energy or motivation. For example, I committed to reading just one paragraph from a book every morning. Even if I was tired, that one paragraph was easy enough to do. Some days, I kept going. Other days, I stopped after that. But the habit was born, and that was the breakthrough. Another powerful tool is accountability. When you tell someone about your English goals, or join a learning group, you create external motivation to show up. You don't want to let others down, so you push yourself even when motivation is low. But accountability works best when the pressure is gentle. Harsh pressure or shame creates stress, which can kill motivation entirely. So find accountability that encourages and supports you, not one that makes you feel bad when you struggle. Sometimes, motivation feels blocked because we expect too much from ourselves. We want to be perfect speakers immediately. We want to understand every word. But learning a language is messy. It's a process full of mistakes, confusion, and slow progress. Accepting imperfection is key. When you stop chasing perfection, motivation shifts from fear of failure to joy of learning. You can start to appreciate the small wins, like understanding a joke, or having a short conversation, even if you stumble. It's also important to change how you think about failure. Mistakes aren't failures, they're feedback. Each mistake is a clue showing you what to improve next. When you see mistakes this way, you stay curious and motivated, rather than discouraged. Now let's talk about energy. Motivation is tied to energy levels, and energy is influenced by sleep, nutrition, exercise, and mental health. If you're exhausted or stressed, motivation will naturally dip. Taking care of your body and mind is not a distraction from learning English, it's part of learning English. When you prioritize rest, movement, and healthy habits, you're building a foundation for sustained motivation. Another big motivator is progress. Seeing progress, no matter how small, fuels motivation. But progress isn't always obvious. Sometimes you improve quietly and slowly, and you don't notice. That's why tracking progress is so powerful. When you record your achievements, whether it's learning 5 new words, finishing a podcast episode, or holding a conversation, you create proof of growth. And proof motivates like nothing else. There's also the power of variety. Doing the same learning routine every day can get boring and kill motivation. Mixing things up, like switching between reading, listening, speaking, and writing, keeps your brain interested and engaged. Remember, motivation loves novelty. Trying a new podcast, watching a funny video, or chatting with a new language partner can reignite your excitement and keep motivation alive. But beware of the shiny object syndrome. Jumping from one method to another without consistency can prevent you from building true skills. Balance variety with commitment to a few core habits. It helps to set realistic and flexible goals. Instead of aiming to be fluent in 3 months, set small, achievable targets like practice English 5 minutes a day, or learn 3 new phrases this week. When goals feel achievable, motivation stays steady. When goals feel overwhelming, motivation crashes. So break big goals into small steps you can actually do. Celebrate progress in meaningful ways. Give yourself credit for showing up, no matter what. Celebrate small victories with a treat, a break, or simply a moment of gratitude. Positive reinforcement boosts motivation more than self-criticism ever will. Another secret is to build motivation rituals, small actions that signal to your brain it's time to learn. Maybe it's brewing a cup of tea before studying, or putting on headphones and a special playlist. Rituals create consistency and comfort. They tell your brain, this is learning time, even before you start. Over time, your brain starts to crave those moments, and motivation follows naturally. Also, be mindful of your self-talk. The words you say to yourself about learning impact motivation deeply. If you say, I'm terrible at English, or I'll never get this, you're creating a motivation block. Instead, practice kindness in your inner dialogue. Say things like, I'm learning every day, or mistakes help me improve. These affirmations don't need to be perfect or fancy, just true and encouraging. Let me share a story. When I was struggling with speaking, I used to beat myself up for not being perfect. One day, I decided to speak to myself in English out loud for 5 minutes every morning, no matter what. Some days it was painful. I stumbled over words and felt awkward. But I kept showing up. Slowly, those moments built a foundation of confidence and motivation. I realized motivation wasn't magic, it was earned through action. Motivation can sometimes feel like a mysterious force that comes and goes on its own schedule. One day, you wake up feeling energized and ready to conquer English. The next day, you can barely bring yourself to open a book. This unpredictability makes motivation feel unreliable as a driving force. That's why many experts suggest focusing less on motivation itself, and more on creating the right conditions for learning. Think of motivation as the weather. You can't control it, but you can decide to carry an umbrella or stay indoors. Creating habits, setting up routines, and designing your environment are like preparing for any weather that comes your way. One of the best ways to stay consistent is to tie your English practice to an existing habit. For example, you might decide to listen to an English podcast every time you have your morning coffee. Because coffee is a daily habit, you create a natural cue for your English practice. This technique is called habit stacking. It's powerful because your brain doesn't have to decide whether or not to do the new habit. The existing habit triggers it automatically, bypassing the need for motivation. Another strategy is to make your learning so easy that it feels almost effortless. When you set the bar too high, like deciding to study for an hour every day, it can feel overwhelming. Instead, try setting a ridiculously small goal, like 1 sentence or 1 new word a day. This idea is called the 2-minute rule. Start so small that it's impossible to say no. Once you start, momentum often carries you forward naturally. Before you know it, those 2 minutes turn into 10 or 20, and your motivation grows from the action itself. It's important to remember that motivation doesn't just come from external rewards, like getting a good grade or praise. Internal satisfaction, feeling proud of yourself, enjoying the process, or discovering new things, is often a much stronger motivator. Finding joy in small achievements is key. Celebrate when you understand a tricky sentence in a book or manage to say a phrase correctly. These little wins build a positive feedback loop that fuels motivation organically. One thing that often goes unmentioned is that motivation is deeply tied to our identity. When you start to see yourself as a language learner or English speaker, your motivation shifts because your actions align with who you believe you are. Identity-based motivation is powerful because it doesn't rely on outcomes like passing a test or speaking perfectly. Instead, it's about embodying the person you want to become. So saying, "I am someone who practices English daily," is more motivating than "I want to learn English." However, changing your identity isn't always easy. It takes time and repeated actions. But each time you practice English, you reinforce your identity as an English learner. Over time, this becomes a natural part of who you are. Let's talk about how social connections influence motivation. Learning with friends or joining a community can dramatically increase your motivation because it creates shared goals and support. When you feel accountable to others, even loosely, it's harder to skip practice. Plus, social learning adds fun and variety, which keeps motivation high. You might exchange messages, correct each other gently, or celebrate milestones together. But if social pressure becomes too intense, it can backfire. Fear of judgment or competition might make you avoid practicing. So it's important to find or create a supportive, non-judgmental environment where mistakes are welcomed. Another overlooked aspect is how motivation interacts with mindset. A fixed mindset, "I'm just not good at languages," can drain motivation, while a growth mindset, "I can improve with effort," fosters resilience and curiosity. Cultivating a growth mindset means embracing challenges and failures as opportunities. It encourages you to keep trying even when motivation wanes, because you see effort as a path to mastery. It's helpful to remind yourself that motivation is just one piece of the puzzle. Willpower, discipline, environment, mindset, and identity all work together to support your learning journey. When you feel stuck, try shifting your focus away from motivation and toward these other factors. For example, improve your study environment by removing distractions or try new learning methods to spark curiosity. Sometimes, taking a break from traditional studying can reignite motivation. Watching English movies, playing games, or chatting with friends in English can be more motivating than textbook drills. Bear in mind that motivation doesn't always come first. It can also be a result of taking action. Acting as if you are motivated can create real motivation over time, like a feedback loop. It's important to be patient and kind with yourself. Everyone struggles with motivation sometimes. It's normal. What matters is how you respond and adapt your strategies to keep moving forward. So, next time you feel unmotivated, remind yourself that motivation isn't the problem. It's a signal to adjust your approach, slow down, or try something new, not a sign to give up. By focusing on habits, mindset, environment, and identity, you create a sustainable learning journey that doesn't depend on motivation alone. Motivation is like the wind. It's unpredictable and changes often. But with the right tools and mindset, you can still set your sails and keep moving forward, no matter the weather. One practical way to keep your sails steady is to remind yourself why you started learning English in the first place. Reconnecting with your personal reasons, whether it's for career growth, travel, or making new friends, can reignite your passion and keep you moving even when motivation dips. It also helps to track your progress in a simple way. Seeing how far you've come, even with small improvements, builds confidence and fuels your desire to keep going. Progress isn't always obvious day to day, but a journal or checklist can make it visible. Another secret is to embrace flexibility in your learning. Some days you'll feel like diving deep into grammar or writing. Other days, just listening to music or watching a show is enough. Giving yourself permission to vary your approach prevents burnout and keeps the process enjoyable. Don't forget that self-compassion is your greatest ally. Instead of criticizing yourself for feeling unmotivated or missing a study session, treat yourself like a friend who needs encouragement and rest. This kindness creates a positive cycle that boosts motivation naturally. Always remember that learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a lifelong journey filled with ups and downs. When you stop expecting constant motivation and instead build supportive habits and mindsets, you set yourself up for success over the long haul. Lastly, bear in mind that motivation isn't your only tool. Discipline and commitment are what carry you through when motivation fades. Discipline is showing up even when you don't feel like it, and commitment is staying connected to your goals long term. Motivation is the spark, but discipline is the fire that keeps you warm. Both are necessary, but discipline is what makes the journey sustainable. So instead of waiting for motivation, cultivate discipline. Create simple habits, track your progress, celebrate your wins, and be kind to yourself. That's how you keep moving forward, even when motivation feels low. And don't forget, it's normal to have ups and downs. Some days will be more motivated than others, and that's okay. The goal isn't to be perfect, but to keep going. To sum up, motivation is not the mysterious magic you're waiting for. It's a feeling that follows action, not the other way around. Real progress comes from consistent, small actions designed into your daily life. So start small. Start now. And trust that motivation will catch up with you.
Your English is shining brighter by the minute. Hit that next video to keep leveling up your skills. Or dive into our other episodes for more secrets to talk like a pro. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to join the Groovy English crew.